Hello, my name is Bobby Graham and I'm talking today about Summer Sketches, Belgrade and Montenegro, which is a book I produced recently of my sketches that I did when I visited in 2016 and 2019. But first I have to put it into context, why Belgrade and why Montenegro. The story starts about 100 years ago with my mother and her family who moved from a small place called Kusovac to Belgrade where they settled and she was raised. I've met, of the 7 children, I wasn't able to meet 2 because they passed away, and I never met my grandparents, but I was fortunate enough to meet my aunts and my uncles. So fast forward a few years, and my parents, my father who came from Leskovac, had lived through the Second World War in Belgrade, where they experienced terrible atrocities, but they survived, and in 1947 my parents married and decided to set up life together. But they quickly decided that they didn't really want to stay in Belgrade. They didn't like the new regime, and my father left on a business trip and went to Paris, where my mother joined him, and they spent a year or so before they had to leave because they were stateless refugees. So my father got a job in Johannesburg, South Africa, and in 1954, at the end of the year, they sailed from Europe to the southern hemisphere and settled in Johannesburg, where I was born. 2 years later, we moved back to Cape Town, which is where I grew up. My sister, who was 8 years older than me, had come from Belgrade, as well as my parents had done. So I grew up always hearing about Belgrade and how wonderful it was. Both my parents loved it, but it was only in 1977 that I went to visit for the first time. And it was then, after a 10-week holiday in Europe with my girlfriend, that I went to Belgrade and met my family. Now, I'd met my aunt Nada the previous year for the first time, so I had no connection, no knowledge and no relationship with any of these family members. But it was a wonderful experience because my aunt took me under her wing and introduced me to the family, who welcomed me so incredibly warmly. And she took me by the hand literally and walked me around Belgrade, and we visited other parts of the country on that first 10-day visit. I visited another few times in the ensuing decades, but it was only when I went in 2008 with my mother, who was 87 at the time, to visit my aunt, who was 90, that I got a better sense of what Belgrade was like, because they took me literally again by the hand through the streets to visit places where they had lived, where my parents went to after they got married, which church they were married in. And it was a really wonderful experience to see Belgrade through my mother and my aunt's eyes. But it was only after my mother had died and I went back again in 2016 that I decided to take a sketchbook with me. I was traveling on my own, and I thought, well, if I take a sketchbook, I can do something when I sit for those long hours at the airport, or I'm eating alone in a cafe or restaurant. So I hadn't done any sketching before, but I had this inclination that I would be the next Turner. I sort of imagined myself producing these beautiful watercolor illustrations. It was a much bigger learning experience than that, and I started off with very simple pencil drawings until a friend suggested that I try using pen, and it was the pen that made the big difference. So that very first book that I produced in 2016 was a kind of a tentative approach to capture what I saw. And then when I went back in 2019, I had a little more confidence, and I took a better quality sketchbook with me and a better quality pen. And I sketched whatever I saw. So to understand what I do, I love location and urban sketching. And I usually sit on a street corner or at a cafe or overlooking a beautiful view, and I just sketch what I see in front of me. And it always draws people to me, and we always have a chat, and I meet people, and it's a lovely, lovely way of capturing what I'm seeing, my travels, and getting to know the local people as well. So what is it about Belgrade that I like? Well, Belgrade's like a grand older woman. It's very stylish. It's a little tired sometimes. It might be a little dated, but it's such an authentic, wonderful city, and it contains fabulous architecture. I always make a point of starting my trip there by visiting the Sveti Sava, which is the largest Serbian Orthodox cathedral in the world. This is actually a contemporary building which is still not yet complete. The building seems to go on and on, but one can go inside, and it's a very splendid building. I also love the architecture in the streets. I always stay at the Majestic Hotel, but the hotel that I want to point out is the Hotel Moscow, which is a very fine example of 1908 Art Nouveau architecture, and stands very proudly by itself on a busy street corner. I also like getting a little out of Belgrade, and there's a place called Zemun, which is actually on the Sava River, and that's got a lovely bohemian village quality to it. So there are cafes and lovely pedestrian walkways. It's a place to come and unwind and get out of the busy city. I particularly love the markets. I've been to 2 major markets in Belgrade, and they are part of the quality of the life. When I first went there and stayed with my aunt, every morning she would get up early and walk up the hill, most probably a 20-minute walk, to the markets to get me fresh bread, some ham, some cheese for breakfast. And I've subsequently gone to the markets every single time that I'm in Belgrade and enjoyed walking through the stalls, looking at the produce, and occasionally even buying a little carpet for myself. I also love the culture of Belgrade. So my parents were great readers, and they introduced me to books and reading and art and architecture. And I've always enjoyed that about Belgrade, that you can see it and walk the streets and you're infused with it. You can't escape it. Culture's all around you. So when I went in 2008, my mother and my aunt decided they wanted to take me to their birthplace, which is this town called Kusovac. It's hardly a town, it's just a little village. And that was an incredible experience to go with them so they could show me the house where they were born. And they also took me to Borac to visit the church where they were baptized, and I was completely blown away to discover that the church was built in 1359. And unfortunately we couldn't get into the church because it was summer holidays, but we were able to walk around and experience the atmosphere of being in a place like that. So Belgrade has a very special place for me, but I always like to go to Montenegro, to the coast. Now, my mother used to go to Montenegro with her sister, my Aunt Nada, and she went most probably every year for about 5 years, well into her 80s. And she recommended this place and this particular house for me, which is where I go and stay every time that I'm there. And I just love it because it's beach culture, it's ancient. The villages, the surrounding villages were built by the Venetians. They nestled into the corners of these beautiful bays to protect them from the marauding Turks. The lifestyle is relaxed, the food is fabulous, the water's warm, and I always, as I say, stay in the same house, which was built in, I think it was built in 1912, and I rent the upper story, and then I just walk across the little road to the pebbly beach, and I absolutely adore it. So those were the inspirations for my drawings. But for me, I think the most important part is retaining the memories of family and being able to go and visit them and feel as if I really belong. So I just love Belgrade as my second home, and I'm planning another visit there soon. So hopefully there'll be more illustrations that will come from it. And if you're interested in looking at some of my work, which has been inspired, I guess, by my Serbian heritage, I've got a website called Bobby Graham Publishers, from where I publish and make these books available. I've also got a website called Bobby Graham Art, where I publish my own art. And then just this past year, I've started a small business called Slow Art, where I run courses for people who are interested in de-stressing and getting together with like-minded people, and I do that through lovely art courses. So who knows, maybe one day you'll join me. Thank you so much for listening.